Welcome to the Lounge with Travefy Academy, where we get to hear from travel industry voices and experts to learn more about their story and also what they see on the horizon for travel professionals. And I'm Stephanie Grice, and our guest today is Steph Lee, who is founder of Host Agency Reviews. Welcome to the Lounge, Steph. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I love hanging out with Stephanie. I actually had a call with Stephanie before this. And I was like, this is the best day ever.
It's Stephanie Day. I love it. That is so awesome. Yes, it's always so fun. And I was just saying before this that I can't believe you haven't been on a podcast before. So we had to get you on here.
I know. I was feeling very left out, Stephanie.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you reached out.
Oh yeah. Got to get you on into the lounge, it's really cool. And just such a good episode today, just all about host agencies, and who better to ask that question than to Steph Lee. so this is really perfect. But before we dive into all of that stuff though, can you just share a little bit of your background and just how did you get into the travel industry and how did you start Host Agency Reviews?
Yes. So I always say I kind of grew up in the travel industry. When I was in high school, my mom started a home-based travel agency in the basement. This was right when host agencies were just starting to happen, like really old school. And so I kind of worked in and out of helping my mom when I came home between jobs or in the summers and different things. So I had a really good feel for things. And then I swore, like many children that grow up in the travel industry, I was going to do my own thing, and I went and did my own thing for quite a few years. And then I came home and back to Minneapolis, and I started working at my mom's agency once they moved out of the basement and moved to a storefront. I was like, working in a basement at my parents' house is not my thing.
Don't blame you.
Yeah. So we went to the storefront, and I tried. I shouldn't say I tried. I did do some bookings, but I did not like it at all. I'm not really a salesperson. And so I discovered though that I really loved this host agency division they had. And at the time it was much smaller and localized. And I saw so much potential. So I started working at their agency, building up the host agency division. And the timing was really just perfect. It was right when host agencies were really, really taking off. And I became very well connected within the host agency industry and really got to know it well. And after I left my parents after about 5 years, I decided to start Host Agency Reviews because there was just a lack of transparency on the host agency side of things, like what they were, who were the good host agencies, because there were some bad ones, especially in the beginning. And just kind of gathering all that information. And part of the other goal of this site is not just to have a directory of host franchising consortia, but it's also to let people know our blog portion is really, we get about 70,000 visits a month. And those people are coming from the blog portion mostly, like they're learning how the travel industry works. And that was the goal. Like I was a former educator. So I think that's kind of where it came from, as being like, well, we need to actually educate people when they're Googling online these questions and give them answers so that we're getting people that are a good fit for our industry. So that's kind of the story.
That's awesome. That is so cool. I love that. And yep, don't blame me at all on wanting to pivot your career change a little.
Yeah. You don't like the basements either at your parents' house?
Yeah, it's it's okay, but to work every day too. Oh man. But that is cool. It's a blessing to all of us because then you get this wonderful resource, to look, like you said, there's so many different options out there. That's kind of what I want to talk about today, because I really want to tailor this specifically also for a lot of new travel. There's so many new travel advisors entering the industry now, which is super cool. It's so awesome and really awesome. But then there's also a lot of people who are veterans and they're maybe looking for a change. So that's why it's going to be really cool. But for those who are listening, who are new to the new to the industry or in search of a new host agency for someone who's already been in it, can you just explain just what is the value of a host agency and what is really their job?
Yes. So, I mean, technically you're aligning with them. Like you need an accreditation number to be recognized as a travel agent to get paid these commissions, and you're using the host agencies and not getting your own. But the benefits that come with that are so many. So one of the big ones that usually weighs pretty heavily for a lot of people is you can get higher commissions. Since everything in travel is usually based on, for most suppliers, the volume that you're bringing in. So the more you sell, the higher commission you get. instead of starting out at 10%, you might be starting out at 17% or get like free perks or different things like that. Or for instance, with Travify, the host agency might have a partnership with Travify where they're giving you a deal because you're part of that host agency versus you having to buy that on your own. So there's a lot of economies of scale that come with a host agency. There's also things that are less tactile, I would say, that come with a host agency is not just these high commissions, but host agencies are really big sellers in the travel industry. They are very well connected with suppliers. And so, especially if you're a new advisor, when you come in, if you don't know what you're doing, it is so nice to be able to tap into their network, not just of suppliers, but if you need to talk to a BDM, they'll know who you need to talk to and what you need to do. But it's also their network of advisors, because coming in, starting your own business just in general is kind of confusing and you feel a little bit lost. So it's really nice to have a community. You'll meet other new advisors that are just starting on, and then you'll have the experienced veteran advisors where you can read the forums, where they're asking questions. You can ask questions in there. So those are some of the big reasons. They do the marketing, the technology. They can also bring down costs in terms of a very tangible benefit. They can bring down costs for things like with Travify, like I said, but there's also seller of travel licenses that you might need in certain states. And if you go with a host, you can save, $100-something in the state of Florida. So there's a lot of benefits to it. And for us, we are big fans of host agency, but if it's not a good fit for someone, I will tell them like, oh, you already, like if you're selling Zimbabwe and you have all the connections on the ground and you know who you want to use, you may not need a host agency. They're not going to be that great of a help for you or get you higher commissions or anything like that. But I would say probably 95% or more of people that I talk to, I would recommend a host agency for the first couple of years. And if you decide after that you want to go on your own, that's not a problem. That's what's cool about kind of the host agency field, is you're not tied down to anything.
I love that. Well, and I think it's really important too that, it might not be for everyone. The perfect example you said is maybe if you already have your stuff set up and you're special, especially with specializing and all of that, or letting go after a couple years. Cause I've heard a lot of that too, where they figure out who their suppliers are and might not need, the other stuff that comes with it.
Yeah. Cause I mean, if you're selling like after 3 to 5 years, that's when people usually start, their agency really takes off. If you're selling, say, FunJet vacations or something, and for some reason that's all you're selling, and you can get to the top tier on your own and you want the own recognition and you have these relationships, then you can definitely leave your host agency and it's not a big deal at all.
Yeah, that's awesome. The flexibility, that's the great thing. You're not locked in. That's what's so cool about it too. And so for anyone who is thinking about joining a host agency, what are some of the things that they should be asking or thinking about when they're choosing what would work best for them?
Well, there's a lot of things. I think when they're looking for a host agency, it's really important. On the site we have, and I'll send you the link so we could put it in the show notes, but we have a link to a download with a spreadsheet that kind of has all the questions to ask, at least the main questions. So it'll be things like, do they provide E&O insurance for you? What are the costs for training? What kind of training is it? Is it in person? Is it webinars? Are there boot camps for you to get started? So do they provide a website program? Are your favorite suppliers? What kind of commission levels do they have with them? So I'll send you over that, but I think the most important thing for a new advisor to understand is what exactly they need, which I know is very difficult because when you're just entering an industry, you're like, I don't really know what I need. But like to sit down and think, what is my agency going to focus on? And knowing what your niche is really going to help, because if you're specializing in Disney, you want to go with an agency that probably has other people that are like specializing in Disney for that community. Or if you're specializing in luxury, you probably want to align with a host agency that has a lot of luxury suppliers and connections and higher commissions there. So that's why it's kind of important beforehand, before you start researching hosts, to know on your end what's important to you and what you're looking for. Like, do you want to go to a 5-day boot camp? Is that the best way for you to learn? Or like, I'm a pretty independent learner. And so I would probably be okay with some intense online learning, but other people like their hands held a lot more. So kind of figuring out what would be ideal for you in the host agency relationship is really key.
Yeah, those are really good points. And where can they, and also resource of host agency reviews, which is amazing. Being
Oh,
able
yeah.
to look at the differences and see, all of that. But I know that there's also things like contracts or startup costs, all of that kind of stuff. So are there anything else that they should be aware of that you should be looking for or be ready to research?
No, I'm just kidding.
I was like, well, that's easy.
Yeah, let's just keep things moving. Let's see. I would say when it comes to startup costs, they can vary insanely. And so, some people have smaller budgets, so that's something to keep aware. I would say that when we do our surveys, every year we do an annual travel advisor survey, and we ask people what their startup costs are. And we also ask that for people that finish our 7-day setup program, which kind of helps them set up the business blocks to get ready for their agency to open. And the average, I think it's the average. I get, let me look this up so I don't screw this up. Okay. Oh yeah. So, okay. The mode, excuse me. The mode for people starting is $1,000 is what they're investing for host agencies. But the average can actually be much higher. I think it's like 4,200 or something. And I don't want to scare people away to have them think that they need to be spending 4,200, because what's happening there is if you choose to go with a franchise that's also a host agency, which is getting super complicated, but there is this option where you can do a franchise that's a host. They typically cost quite a bit more, like usually between $10,000 and $30,000 for franchising rights to get started. So those numbers skew everything. But a lot of people can get started with between $500 to $1,000 invested in the host agency, getting registered with their state. There are some, I would say, like in California, if you're registering your LLC, I think it's something like $800. I haven't checked it recently. And if inflation is happening with those too, who knows how much it costs now. But those, like in certain states, it's a lot more expensive to get started. But with things like free websites, like you could do Wix, or you could spend like $10 on your website a month. It can be really inexpensive to get started with things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And bringing up like franchises too. And it's like, yeah, all the different
Oh, so
options,
complicated.
routes. Yes, that's why I was like, we need this episode because there's so many things.
I know it's so hard. And when we're talking about contracts too, when you're looking at the contracts, I mean, if you don't know what the relationship, I've been in the industry for 15 plus years and grew up in it. And so I have a really good feel for it, but I don't know how you would know this stuff, even within your first 5 years. Like it's just a very nuanced and complicated ecosystem. And so when you're looking at your contract, you probably wouldn't have thought of things like, oh, do I need to make sure that there's kind of a fixed time limit for my contract? And one of the things with host agencies is because we're working with independent contractors, and most people, even if you're not familiar with the host agencies, you've probably seen in the headlines the last couple of years with the independent contractor, the gig economy, and how do you classify them as workers or not? And that plays over into travel too. So with your contract, you really want to make sure that you are truly an independent contractor, that they're not requiring you to come in. Or if you're renting some office space from them, like maybe a desk if they have a storefront, that it's very clearly laid out. You can come in anytime. This is how much your desk is going to cost you. It includes the internet, it includes the phone, everything that's in there. And the reason that that's important is because as an independent contractor, your host agency, the commissions come through your host agency and they pay them to you. But if a host agency suddenly gets hit by the IRS, looks at them, or the Department of Labor and says, actually, these are employees because you've been telling them when to come in, or you've been requiring that they take these trainings. So you owe back taxes on that. There's fines on that. That's a huge financial hit for a host agency. And there is the possibility that they could go bankrupt because of it. And so that's why it's so important as an independent contractor to really look at those contracts and make sure that there's no red flags in there. So things like if they have a non-compete, like that's not something you do with an independent contractor. Or if there's something that's not really clear, like one thing that you should also be looking for is, because it's not uncommon for a new advisor to switch host agencies their first couple of years. Like they might find out their niche doesn't work or their host agency wasn't exactly what they thought. And so if you're going to switch host agencies, what you want in that contract is for it to be very non-ambiguous. What happens when you leave to your commissions? Do those get paid out to you? When do they get paid out? What do you need to do in order to make that happen? Because that, we talk with a handful of agents every year that run into this problem where they can't get their money from the host agency. The host agency won't transfer it. And sometimes they can't transfer it, but other times they just aren't willing to.
Wow, that is crazy. You actually answered my question. I was literally thinking like red flags. How do you look for those? So those are the ones. Oh man.
Yeah, there's other things like dual affiliation. As an independent contractor, legally, you could sign up with 15 host agencies if you wanted. Do not recommend it, but you could. Like, do they have something that in there that says you can't be dually affiliated? Or do they have that there's some kind of sales quota or minimum you need to meet? And now I'm going to put an asterisk on that because there are host agencies that will have some sales quotas that need to be met. So it's not necessarily if that's missing that you're not an independent contractor anymore. It's kind of a constellation of these things coming together that would make the judgment on the IRS or the Department of Labor on if you're actually an employee or IC. So there's a lot of subjectivity to it, which is what makes it hard.
Yeah, that is really crazy. But it makes it understanding of why they have to have something like that, just because of the laws and all that and crazy, crazy stuff. So lots of the research, checking it out and the communities too. Like I know there's a lot of Facebook groups too out there, tons of Facebook groups that also, people can go and ask, those questions or who they're with and use host agency reviews and all of that good stuff. And not to throw another layer of complexity to this, but what about different associations? Like, so there's different associations too. And so what are the difference between like CLIA, like for cruise or ASTA compared to like host agencies, and which ones may matter more than others, if you consider joining?
Yeah, well, I'm a huge ASTA fan. So, and for those that aren't familiar, that's the American Society of Travel Advisors, and I'm a big supporter of them. I've been involved with them since I started in the industry, and especially they have transformed. So, if you're an experienced advisor listening to this and you're like, oh, like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I didn't really like what they were doing, and they're a very different organization than they were when I started. And they really pulled their act together. They really advocate on the Hill for legislation that protects travel advisors. So it's in the interest of everyone in our industry to have as many advisor members as we can, because that gives them more money to set up these relationships with the legislators so that they can protect our interests, especially in light of everything with COVID. It's important to have. I honestly I guess I would say I've never been like a political junkie by any means. I'm like as far from it, I'm just like way too goofy to be a political junkie, but I didn't really get how the pieces of the puzzle went together until I went to ASTA Legislative Day. They do that once a year where a bunch of like hundreds of agents fly in and suppliers, people within the industry that are allies. They fly into DC. ASTA sets up everything for you where you go and you talk to the different legislators. And it's just funny because I, again, had no idea what I was doing when I went there. And I was like, oh, we're going to offices. This is like a broom closet. Like they have us in, is this like a walk-in closet? Because it's just a really interesting experience in what it's like in DC. And you get to kind of tell your story on why this is important. Like every year they'll choose 3 talking points and asks that we as an industry think are really important. And you'll talk to your legislator about it. And then hopefully like change can happen from there. So ASTA is a great one to join, not just because of their advocacy and lobbying that they do for us, but they do a lot of educational things. And in fact, I worked with ASTA and we produced the roadmap to becoming a travel advisor course, which if you're new, I would recommend that. Well, of course I would, but I would recommend that 100%. And I would recommend that before you join any host agency or anything like that, because what it does is it gives you, I would say, the like 40,000 foot view of how the industry works. Because that's the most important thing in the beginning when you're deciding to become an advisor is this really a good fit for me? Do I have realistic expectations? Do I understand how the industry works? And that's what that course does. And then if you think it's a good fit, then you can start investing more money. But I'll just say really, if that's something of interest to you, I'll send you the link, Stephanie. And
yeah, for sure.
You can.
I'll add it into the
perfect.
article. Oh yeah, I will put that in here. So
yeah.
everyone go to academy.travfi.com and it's in there.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So that's a great course. And then with CLIA, like CLIA, a lot of agencies belong to. So that's the cruise lines. It's like, instead of the Association of Travel Advisors, it's the Association of Cruise Lines. But they have amazing trainings and ship inspections. So if you are a cruise focused agency, definitely sign up with CLIA. And with your hosted, there's different memberships if you're hosted or not hosted. But I would, they each kind of offer different things. And there's other ones out there. We have like the Association of Black Travel Professionals, ABTP. It doesn't really roll off my tongue, but then you have, let's see what else is out there. You have CLIA. Oh, you have like IATA or IATAN. And that one's the Association of Airlines, and if you would know about it if it was a good fit for you to sign on. For most agents, I would say ASTA is a must join, and CLIA, if you're selling cruises, is going to be very valuable to you.
Would you say too that would it almost make sense sometimes to do one of those first? So join ASTA first, and then go from there the host agency, or is there really not one right way to do it?
I would wait until you joined a host agency to join ASTA, because they're probably going to ask for things like your accreditation number when you get started. So I think if we're talking about a timeline, the associations would be after your agency, you've hung up your sign, you're ready to open. And now, because there's kind of two stages when you're getting set up as an agent. One is like before your agency opens, and that's very focused on business things, like, getting the licenses you need, finding the host agency, getting your website set up. But then, and that's all a huge challenge because most of us have never, started businesses with the state, and you're just kind of figuring all this out. But then the problem comes, you're like feeling like, yeah, I got my agency set up. But now there's a whole new field you need to learn, which is, okay, who are the suppliers? How do I sell them? How do I make bookings? How do I educate? How do I build relationships? Which associations do I need to join? And that's really when you're deep diving into the industry. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is a lot of great stuff just to know, just lots of researching. But the cool thing is there's so much out there. There's so many things depending on where you want to go, what you want to specialize in, or what you're looking for. It's pretty cool actually, like all the stuff. And can you tell us too, really quick, just how listeners can find host agency reviews online and get all that information?
Yes. You can type in hostagencyreviews.com and it'll pull up. And like I said, there's a directory. There's over 3,000 reviews in there. And it gives a lot of metadata if you've never visited. So there's a lot of metadata on these agencies. So, when you go to their sites, they're marketing sites. And so the data isn't easy to compare. Like you'll be able to find probably their commission plans, but on this host agency reviews, there's going to be a lot of details, like which associations they belong to, the cost for getting started, and it's all in the same place. So it makes it much clearer when you're comparing different agencies. And then of course you have the reviews you can read, and there's a question and answer section on every profile. So you can see like how engaged they are and specific questions that people have asked the host agency. So there's lots of good stuff, let alone the blog and the 7-day setup and other programs we have.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And I'll be sure to link all of that on our website too. But love all of that. Before though we pivot here, is there anything else that we didn't talk about with host agencies and just something that everyone should be knowing?
No, they're great. I love them. Yeah, that's I think about it.
They're just awesome.
Big fan,
Yes.
big fan.
Yeah, big fan of those over here. No, that is so awesome. Well, we're not wrapping up quite yet because I didn't tell you this beforehand, but we like to do before we wrap up rapid fire questions.
Oh, I was like, chocolate. No,
Well,
okay,
hey, I
rapid
will
fire
send you
questions.
some. Yes, these are fun. Okay. And if you need a pass, let me know. It's totally fine. But okay, we have 5 of them. Okay, so 5 questions for you. And they're
I'm
fun,
ready.
all fun. Okay, so first one is, what is your favorite destination you've traveled to?
Definitely the polar bears. I went to Churchill, Manitoba and saw it's the polar bear capital of the world. And I love cold things. And that was like a dream of mine. I've always wanted not to cuddle a polar bear because I know that that's dangerous, but I wanted to be in close proximity to them. So that was super, super fun and a very unique experience.
That's great. That would be wild to see.
It was so crazy, Stephanie. Like you're walking and it's a small town in the middle of nowhere. And there's really no roads in and out because of the tundra frost. And it's just really, you have to fly in there. It's very small. There's just like polar bears that are just outside of town, or sometimes they come into town and there's like signs everywhere where you call if there's a polar bear. And then there's like people with, I'm not very good with guns, so I don't know what type of gun, but a long gun. And there's like park rangers that stand kind of on outskirts that are on the outskirts of town that do a lookout for the bears. And then they shoot off bear bangers, which are, I guess, empty shells or something that just make a big noise that scares the bears away.
Yeah.
So like their job is to sit and just look out onto the tundra looking for polar bears. And if they come too close, shoot something up in the air to scare them away. And it was such a cool experience.
That is so insane. That is cool.
Yeah. I would highly recommend it.
That's cool. Well, here's another question for you, kind of a little bit of a different one, is what do you think is the most underrated destination to visit?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see. Oh my gosh. I'm going to come back to this one.
Stumped her. All right.
Cool. I know because I feel like there's so many underrated places.
I know. There is a lot. I'll come back to you on that one. So this next one is, what is the best meal you've had while traveling?
Oh, well, okay. So we're going to go back to the polar bears and I'm going to say the food there is terrible. So just beware of that, especially if you're a vegetarian, because getting fresh fruits and vegetables in there is impossible. So that
makes sense though. Yeah.
Yeah. And I ordered their like veggie sandwich for when we were out in the tundra buggy. And it was like 2 slices of cucumbers on a piece of bread with like a slice of tomato. It was just, I totally get why it happens, but that was very, very sad. I would say I really, really like Asian street food. I think that's really delicious. I like more authentic experiences and I'm not a foodie, at all. And so I just really like this like street vendor experience and, kind of eating like the locals more.
Yeah, nope. I love that. I like that. It's good. Okay, so the next question is what is the last great book or article that you read? And it doesn't have to be travel related.
Well, and my coworker April is really going to like this because we're going out to visit her, the rest of the HAR team this summer, I think. And so she lives in Massachusetts on Cape Cod. And I was like, aren't there a bunch of great white sharks there? And then so this morning I was reading this article on great white sharks in the Cape Cod area. And it was so fun and amazing because there's so many of them. And it was kind of talking about how they're tracking them and why they're coming back and how much they've come back since then. And of course, I don't want anyone to get eaten by a shark, which is how this all started, because as a landlocked, growing up in Minnesota in a landlocked state, the oceans scare me a little bit because they're so powerful. They're not like the lakes. And so when ever since the first time I went into an ocean, all I can think when I'm in there, even though I know it's not rational, is there a shark nearby? Is there a shark nearby? I think there's a shark nearby. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I have shark anxiety, but that was my article I read this morning, and it made me feel like I wanted to hang out with the sharks. So that was exciting.
They're like cool. Like when you start to talk to someone who like they know sharks and stuff, they're like, no, they're really cool. I'm with you though. I went out to Cape Cod in the fall and
That's
love
their
it
peak
so
season.
much. Oh, it was
Did you see
I think it's
one?
like my favorite place like ever. But no, we didn't see one. But right when we were walking out, there was this huge sign that was absolutely terrifying of like they
Yes.
move it every day, like likely that they're here. Like it was just like, oh my God. This is what Jaws is all about.
I know. I feel so
scary.
bad. Usually I'm relatively rational, but for some reason I don't, and I never even saw Jaws, but there was like fun apps you could download that the sharks that they track in the area, there's like 2 different apps you can download. So I downloaded them and I'm just so excited.
Sharks and polar bears. That's what the fun pivot of this episode has become.
No, you can leave it to me to go off on a real tangent somewhere else.
It's the best. That's why I love these rapid fire questions. They are great. But okay, so I have another one and then I'll come back to the underrated destination. So this other one though is, what is the craziest thing that's ever happened to you while traveling?
I've had a lot of crazy things happen to me while traveling. I would say one of the most unique was, and this wasn't even an international travel experience. This was just kind of, I was going hiking once in Northern California, which has beautiful places to hike. But the thing that I was unaware of as like a non-meth maker or meth user was that this is heavy meth country. And like, so I was like this female out by myself hiking on these trails in the middle of nowhere that apparently was a very dangerous area to be in by myself. And so I had parked at the trailhead and I was going to go off for like 4 or 5 days or something hiking. But then there was like some snow. So it turned out not so great. And I went back to my car and my car was dead, but this trailhead's in the middle of nowhere. And so the name of the town is Covelo in Northern California. It's middle of nowhere, very, very small. And so I ended up like putting my car in neutral on the switchbacks down to the main road and then waited and hitchhiked. And then the guy that picked me up is in a pickup truck. And again, I'm not a guns person, but guns keep coming up in this conversation. I don't know why, but I'm going to like put my seatbelt on and I like feel this metal that I think is the like seatbelt, but it's like a gun. And I was like, I'm so afraid of guns because I don't trust myself with anything dangerous. And so I get the ride from the guy into town. And I was kind of scared. And he was like, you should not be here. Like, what are you doing? Do you know where you are? And I was like, no. And he was like, there are a bunch of like people that have meth houses out here and you shouldn't be like walking around like on the trails and things. So I was like, well, why was there no warning anywhere like there are for the sharks? And
yes, right?
yeah, but like so many crazy things happened that day. Like I went into town and there's one place to get the car fixed and they couldn't get it fixed till tomorrow. There's no hotel. And at the library, I met this person that he was very, very hardcore hippie and had a very strong odor, but he was the only person like that I really met in town. And he was like, hey, then I ran into him again at the grocery store later because he wanted to hang out. I was like, no, thank you. But the big picture of the story is I get trapped in this town. This man I'd met at the library, ran into him later and I didn't have a place to stay. He's like, I have a friend you can stay with, like a female friend. But he takes me to his place first, which is across the cornfield from the sheriff's office. And his house is just a complete grow house. Like you walk in and there's just like pot plants, the whole thing. And I'm just like, this is so awkward. We're like looking at the police station out the windows. And then he took me to his friend's house. We had dinner and she's telling the story. And she's like, you know, the weirdest thing happened. Like, I was like, how did you end up here? She's like, well, I came up here and my car broke down and like, I ended up not having the money to get it fixed. So I started waitressing in town. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. Then I met like another friend came over, also female, same story. Her truck broke down, got stuck in the town. And I was so scared. I was like, I think I've landed in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Like, there's like women whose cars break down and you can't get out. And I'm in that situation. And I was like calling friends on my cell phone when I got reception. I was like, I want you to know, this is the address I'm at. And this is what's happening. If I don't come back, please come look for me. But the next day, like later in that afternoon, I was finally able to get out. But it was the weirdest, creepiest. It was just a really weird experience.
Yeah. Okay. You went for like this creepiest, scary story response to that question.
Of course. What would you expect from me?
I know. Oh man, that's so funny. Like,
you never know what you're going to get with me. I swear, like when I go places, like weird things I'm like a magnet.
They just happen.
Weird things.
Yeah. That is wild. So that would not be your most underrated destination to visit. That'd be like that would know be what like, you're getting into type.
Yeah, and come with a couple cars or something because apparently I don't know what happens, but
that is
cars
really weird.
Just break down for young women.
That's so terrifying. No, I think the same thing. I'd be like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Scary. Well, I'm so glad you are safe and sound and here today. Like,
yes.
Terrified. Huh.
Yeah, it was really creepy.
Yeah, that is wild. But did not forget though, the very last question here is, what is underrated? What would you say?
Yeah, and since I don't sell travel, I don't have my pulse on it as much, but I will say, for a point in my life, I worked in Uganda for a little bit, and I feel like that's a very underrated destination in terms of people visiting because it's got a lot of really neat things. Like it's, most people, if they're doing safaris, they'll go into Kenya or something like that. But Uganda has, what's unique about it is you can see the gorillas in the south of it, or like there's elephants up north, and I love the culture when I was there. It's just so open and friendly. And there's a surprisingly large amount of things to see there, like Lake Victoria. So I feel like if people are going to go do the Big Five or do their safari, like they should also really consider tying on going to see the gorillas as well and touring around Uganda.
That's awesome. I love that. We added another animal to
I know
polar bear, sharks, gorillas.
Yeah, and I want to hug them all, and they all are not animals you should hug.
I know. Like, well, you never know. Sometimes you see those, especially like gorillas when they are very nice and
they're just so cute.
I know. They seem so comfy.
I know, like you just want to pet them.
Yeah.
Or hug them or just like sit and have a conversation when it comes to gorillas.
Yeah. Nope. I love it. Well, I might have to retitle this. It's how to find the right host agency and animals you should see in your life.
And then a creepy story.
Creepy story bonus. Oh, I love it. No, this has been awesome. Oh, this is always such a good time. And thank you so much also to everyone tuning into this episode of the Lounge with Travefy Academy. And thanks again to our special guest, Steph, for joining us today. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast or subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of the latest episodes. And we hoped you enjoyed our conversation today and join us again. But for now, stay safe and we will catch you on the next flight.